Hello, I'm Toycat, and these are the swing states for the 2024 election. If you want to become president, you're going to need to win here, or if you're feeling more optimistic, in all of these places, but in either case, the majority of states just don't matter, which is why if you feel to yourself, wow, neither of these candidates really represent me, it's because you probably don't live in a yellow area, realistically one of these. Why are there swing states that determine everything? And also, what do they actually have in common? They'll give you a spoiler, the answer is remarkably little, but why do they have to campaign to particular groups? That's because they are very heavily concentrated in these particular areas. These states are very diverse in the way that they exist as part of the USA, and why do all of the efforts have to go here? I think the simplest answer could come from starting at the basic points, which is the US using an electoral college system. This means that the way you win presidency is not by getting the majority of people on your side. In fact, if you look at any given election, you'll see that actually you don't need the majority of people. Trump won with 3 million fewer votes in 2016, but instead the majority of electoral votes, which is basically these states. You need to have the majority of states on your side, but states are slightly weighted for population, but not fully. So the number of electoral votes you get per capita is much higher in Wyoming, and indeed in Vermont, than it is anywhere else in the country, where it actually can be below 1 in New York, or Florida, or California. Basically, the Electoral College gives a small boost, a big boost to small states really, and it gives no significant boost to big states, which is why you can see that actually, if you want to get the most votes per, or rather the most electoral votes per vote, you need to campaign in these places, except that's not what people actually do, because if you take a closer look at these election results, it's not that Trump did a really good job in Wyoming and that's why this happened, although technically speaking that's true too, and the reverse is true too. In Vermont, Hillary Clinton did a very good job, but the truth of what actually mattered in these places, and you can check this for 2020, it's going to be the exact same. Did Joe Biden do an even better job in Vermont? I think you'll find, wow, he actually did. But the interesting thing about this is that it's not down to winning those states, because they're won by such large margins that the candidates basically don't ever go there. Going and winning votes in Wyoming is a waste for Joe Biden or for Donald Trump, because even though you get free full electoral votes for just a few 100,000 people, the reality is you need to win a lot of people over just to get those free votes, whereas in places like Georgia, you just need to swing 12,000 people for your cause if you're Donald Trump to get those people's votes. And so even though their votes are worth 0.93 per capita, the reality is the number of votes you need to swing to get those huge number is much lower. This is because of the weird fact that every single state besides literally 2 of them, this is why if you ever see like a weird one in Nebraska or Maine, the reason is that they use not a winner-take-all system. They actually do it by district in some cases, which means that even though Trump won Nebraska as a whole, the first district over here, the one district of Nebraska was won by Biden, and so 4 of their votes go to Trump, and 1 of them goes to Biden. And but this is something that only happens in 2 places. In every other state, you win the state by 0.01%. You win the entire thing. And so the way that you win an election, if we scroll down to the states here, is not by winning the largest number of votes overall, but instead it's by this little category called the margin. The margin determines how few votes that you, basically, like I was saying, when you win Wyoming by 43% of the votes, you wasted those votes. You could have taken those 120,000 votes and applied them anywhere else, and it would have been much more efficient. And so if you're not thinking on a I want to win the most people over basis, but instead on a I want to win power basis, you want to go right down here to the smallest wins, and you want to win those states over. If Biden is looking to, if the new nominee is looking to take over and win a state that Trump won last time, then their first bet should not be Wyoming, but instead should be North Carolina. It might only be worth 0.96 electoral votes per capita or whatever, but the reality is you only need to win over, what is the actual number here? 74,000 people to your side, and then you can take it. In reality, this then puts, this puts the Democratic Party on the massive defensive, because if they just win the exact same states they won in 2020, they'll do great in the reality, and so they need to hold on to Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, as well as Nevada and Michigan. And wow, oh, I see why those are swing states now. If you can swing a small number of voters, because, I referenced it that like, oh yeah, Georgia was won by, as you can see here, just 11,000 votes, but that means if it was won by 11,779 votes, that you can get 11,770 I guess, 780 more votes, and you can win that way, or you can convince 6,000 of those people to switch from Biden to Trump in 2024, and if those people will do that, then you can win it with a very tiny swing from one party to the other, and boom, swing states. These are the 6 ones where swinging is most likely. Weirdly, it's I think by the time you get down to Nevada and Michigan, where like 2.39% and 2.78%, I think you should start to then include North Carolina in there. But because of the way opinion polling is going, this largely is a defensive election, and so if all the incumbent Democratic Party person has to do is hold on to every single vote they won in 2020 and have not a large number of those people, it can be a few hundreds but not thousands of people shifting from their party to the Republican Party, and boom, that's how they win. And so their campaigning sort of reflects that. By the way, just as a fun thing here, how many swing states are there is something which has been going down quite surprisingly. So you can see actually kind of like there's kind of like a tick-tock cycle here, but interestingly you can see as where there was 22 states which switched party, or 5 states or 11 or 9, there's been surprisingly few swing states in recent elections. And if you take a fun look at this, you can see how many states were won by a margin of 3 points or less, and you see that really there's 7 states right here, compared to in some elections past it's been a lot higher. Like, okay, or rather, sorry, this is a lot higher than it has been before. Look at that, only 3 states in 2012, only 5 states including Montana, interestingly, in 2008. And then in 2016, it explodes. The current presidential cycle, for whatever reason, you can put it onto Trump, you can put it onto the current state of the Democratic Party, but for whichever reason, instead of elections being won by huge margins, by huge flips going back and forth, instead what has started to happen is the small states have become mattering more. I guess the way you could put this is it's become entirely acceptable for any politician to say, and even the people who live in California would say, yeah, don't campaign here, don't try and win over my vote. If I want you to win as president, you gotta go in Arizona and Nevada and then Wisconsin and Michigan over and over and over again. And so that is what the candidates do. It's become entirely electorally viable and valuable to just be like, yes, we will go to these places over and over again. And so even though there will be occasional, just feelers out to places that are a little bit further in there, so one of the wild ones, people, I think this is an interesting one, but Florida is obviously the traditional swing state. But what about Texas? Texas is a place that everyone thinks of as being like true red, deep red meat, state. It's like you look at it and it's like, well, only 5% of voters, 600,000 people, have to switch over, and then that's a huge win for one party. So the states that are closest to the middle here are the ones that the parties will be trying to turn over. And so if they want to turn over Virginia, or a lot of people said that was a swing state, but it's like it's quite far down there, or Colorado, which used to be a swing state, you need to get quite deep into the votes before you can make a difference there. And so yeah, really the entire election, if you look at the electoral votes, is basically down to these 3 or 4 states. Around 40,000 people switching sides, or 20,000 of those people switching sides, would lead to one president or another, which is pretty insane when you really think about it. And so as long as you can gain those 20,000 people over, it doesn't matter if you lose 1 million votes in this state. That's not enough to lose. I mean, I have to guess it's going to be Oregon, right? Oh, Illinois. You can lose 1 million votes in Illinois. You can lose 5 million votes in what has to be California. You can lose 5 million votes in California and still come up ahead. It is genuinely worth exchanging if you could go to the genies of the election and say, I will give you 5 million California votes. Just give me 5,000 in Georgia. Just give me 79,000 in North Carolina, and that would be an incredibly smart play to make, which is why the candidates do what they do. Even more interestingly, if you look at the swing voter, the median person who's likely to switch from one party to the other, you can see an even more interesting analysis, which is that all likely voters are about just under 50-50 female to male, or just over 50-50, but in swing voters, female slightly higher. Age, the average voter, you can see that there are a lot of over 45s, but not necessarily in swing voters. And the same with swing voters in race. Most voters are white, but most swing voters are not white. And so this is something which, without diving too deep into the racial politics, there are 4 maps I want to show you which really explain the swing voter situation. First of all, something that has to be mentioned is the US has, usually, I guess nowadays it's very common for countries to have like, the traditional multi-year, multi-generation citizens in that way, and then people who have immigrated, either first, second, or third generation. So you've got like usually that breakdown, but then America has the whole like, oh yeah, there is a group of Americans who have just as long of a heritage to the country, but a slightly different relationship with why that is, and this really concentrates in a few swing states, notably the biggest one here being Georgia. It comes up a little bit in some of the other states, but really this is a Georgia and slightly a Michigan thing, right? So, and especially given that they are more likely to swing, there is a huge focus on, again, you can lose your, regardless of which side you're on, you could lose a few white voters over there out in Wyoming or out in Montana, but if you were to gain over here, that would be something that parties might say is worth doing. When it comes to, so again, it's hard to actually get GDP values for states, but the closest thing you have is this map right here, which shows you the relative wealth of states. You can see the wealthiest is New York at 105,000, then California, actually, then Washington, then California, and you can see the poorest is Mississippi. There's a fun thing about, like, thank God for Mississippi, like, it's an interesting state over here, but it's literally half the income of one of the richer states, right? There is a huge income difference, and so some of these swings, most of the swing states are actually close to the middle, but on the slightly lower end. The politics that work in the wealthy states might not be the same as the politics that work over here, something that's worth mentioning, and so Georgia in particular, same with Michigan, and Michigan and Wisconsin really particularly have that story of a decline. It's not just that they, they've never been rich in some way, it's that they were very wealthy states that kind of lost that at some point, maybe in some people's opinions due to politicians. If you can put that onto the other side, that's something that's great. If you can claim you'll make these places great, perhaps again, perhaps you could add that to your slogan. That would be a big winning slogan. You could afford to alienate the voters in Illinois, to be totally honest, if you got some voters in Michigan, and that is something that both parties are at least aware of, right? If not necessarily gunning for. When it comes to median age, there is another interesting trend here. I was surprised to see how different it is by state. In, again, looking at Florida, 42, there's a lot of retirees there, but Utah on 31, I know that they have a lot of children in the Church of Latter-day Saints, but 31 is the average age, and so in Pennsylvania, is Pennsylvania one of the 6, actually? It is one of the 6, I had to make sure there. So in Pennsylvania, for example, you need to appeal with an entirely different set of politics. The same with Florida, the traditional swing state that's kind of switched over. And so young politics might help for trying to go for the big one of Texas, or for trying to get some of your base voters going on. But really, the old voter, like 39.8, 39.5, these are all pretty old states besides Georgia and to a lesser extent Nevada. And so, yeah, that is something you have to consider. Also, education. It's worth mentioning that one of the lesser educated states is Nevada, and a lot of people try to pin this down to they just ain't smart over there. I want to say the idea that a degree represents smartness in some way, I think is a little backwards and is mostly held by people who have degrees. I think the real bigger difference that this tells you is people's trust in institutions and systems. When you spend an extra few years voluntarily in a system that promises to look after you and does all these things, and then at some point maybe does, that will change your opinion, versus someone who is desperately trying to avoid those structures. People who aren't in this are more likely to be self-employed, or more likely to maybe have there's a very different relationship with governments, to say the least, and so this is something that needs to be kept in mind if you're going for Nevada, which again, it's not that swingy. In terms of total votes, it's like, yeah, you only need 80,000, but that's actually quite a substantial amount in terms of, it's something that's worth mentioning, is that, yeah, if you want to win, oh, sorry, it's 33,000 in Nevada, it's 80,000 in Pennsylvania, but still, you're talking about quite a large percent, but that is one of the things which the parties have to consider. The things that represent the swing states, therefore, is you need to do especially good with African-American populations. Again, it used to be formally you had to do good with Latinos and stuff like that, but the preferred demographic for the swing voters, if you're going for just winning swing voters at all costs, is this is one of them. The wealth is something that, again, none of these swing states are amazingly wealthy. How do you make them wealthy? You could make a claim to doing that. You need to work out how to appeal to older voters. Younger voters have a very different set of ideals, socially speaking, politics, and there's economics and there's social politics, right? And they both do change as you age, but particularly social politics. People who consider themselves to be left-wing, or Democrats even, might have very conservative views in the mainstream if they are 40 plus years old. And a lot of these people, if that's the average, a lot of people are significantly above that. And then also, the percent of people with a 4-year degree is something that means that you can't, being the party of the smart people, of the technocratic policies, also is something that neither party can necessarily afford to do in a particularly great way, outside of Virginia, where it looks like it's great. And yeah, that's really, of all the swing states, it's probably, it's not even a swing state, but out of all the swing-ish states, you know, this one right here, that's about as close as you get. So that is the, those are the base demographics. There's a lot more to this. I really do think, you know, if you want to read into it more, the whole, like, it really comes down to suburban voters. It comes down to people without college experience, like I mentioned. It comes down to people, women more than men are more likely to swing. And it comes down to the, basically an interesting thing here. One of the most fascinating stats that I found from this swing voter analysis is the fact that they are more likely to swing to the left, but then not believe in the left-wing candidate. Something that they really need to nail down and work out, and also that they're significantly more likely to vote third party than the average person. If you look at 2020 swing voters, it's like, yeah, the majority say they don't want Biden or Trump, and this has changed since Biden is not the candidate, but that is something that both candidates have to work out what they're going to do. How do you get people who say that they want anyone but you to vote for you in the end? And the answer is you campaign very, very negatively. Something you're going to see especially strong this election is you're going to see politics which are about the other party is so bad and needs to be stopped. And that's something that's been happening forever, but it's especially important this time for the reasons that came in here, but also the fact that most independent voters are willing to shun both candidates. So yeah, there you go, 2024 election, but in maps. Did you like this weird mixture of politics and maps together? If you did, let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this video, consider getting a longboi. We got the channel mascot turned into a plush, a very long plush, and for just $29.99, you can get one of these specially made just for you. There is only a limited number that will be produced in this fun edition, and if you want to get your hands on it, it's great for a pillow, it's great as a gift, it's great as a neck pillow for a flight. If you want to get your hands on one, consider going to the link down below. There is, it is literally just under a week left to get one, and if you would do it, it'd be a great way to support the channel. It's something I'm doing for the other channel, but I feel like some of you might appreciate learning about it, just like how some of you might appreciate second channel. Don't care. Goodbye.